Welcome to the Sounds podcast and Sounds of Film radio show, where art, culture, and storytelling intersect. I'm your host, Tom Needham. Today we have an exciting conversation planned with director Jim McKay, whose groundbreaking 1996 film, Girls Town, is newly restored in 4K. This gritty and powerful indie classic delves into the lives of three teenage girls navigating the painful realities of patriarchal violence and finding solidarity and empowerment in the process. With a bold improvisational style and a soundtrack featuring icons like Queen Latifah and PJ Harvey, Girls Town is as relevant today as it was when it premiered at Sundance nearly 3 decades ago. Join us as we discuss the making of the film, the indie film landscape of the 1990s, and Jim's artistic journey. Jim, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Tom. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm not 100%, but I think I might have met you briefly. I don't know if you remember showing the film here on Long Island at the
Ah,
Cinema Arts Center years ago,
yep, yep.
and it was a way different time.
It was.
That time when every new independent film that got some attention was very exciting, and yours was definitely one of them. What do you remember from that era?
Wow. Well, as they say, it was all a blur. But I don't know. It was a whole. The whole scene was new to me. It was my first film, and um, I had uh, we had come out of Sundance with what was like quote unquote a hit. And yet it was on a lot of levels a tiny little very very independently made movie. um, I think it was perfect for the time. I think things are really different now, and on some levels the landscape is a little bit more tricky for smaller films. On other levels better, but yeah, it was great. I mean, I think I was a very, very, the meanings behind the film, the message of the film, the content was really, really front and center for me. Um, and uh, so it was great to be able to actually get the film out there and talk about that. Although when push comes to shove, it's a movie, and sometimes people want to hear less about that and more about the other stuff. So it was a learning experience, but a great one that led me to dive right into the writing of my second film, which followed I think about 4 years later, which was Our Song.
Well, you've been doing so many different things through the years, and I do want to talk about Girls Town, but I have to say I didn't even think I needed to rewatch it because I had seen it, but to get ready for the interview, I was like I should really rewatch it, and I'm so
Mm,
glad I did. And you mentioned that there's a lot of ideas in the film, and I honestly think, looking back, like when I first watched the film years ago, I probably was just more drawn into the soundtrack, the fact that you were getting a lot of attention because of Sundance. It was an
mhm.
indie film. It just seemed like, one of those movies I had to see at the time. And now rewatching it, I mean, I knew what it was about, but I really heard the words, I think, more than I
Mm,
did when I was a younger person. Do you
mm.
think that's going to be true for a lot of people?
I hope so. And it's great to hear you say that. I felt the same way, when I re-encountered it 5 years ago to make the restoration. And we did screen the film 2 years ago at a special restoration festival at MoMA. We had a couple screenings there, and there were a lot of people who had seen it, you know, 30 years earlier, and uh, it yeah, it was different. I mean, um, your memories stick as one thing or another, and I don't know exactly what mine were, but I just obviously the passing of time and watching it all these years later and seeing in what places things have progressed, and in what places things have receded. And so for me, and now in the last couple of days, I've just started talking to people, doing interviews about the re-release, and it's also that process has also made me just realize, like, wow, um, the film is still extremely relevant, and
Hmm.
on certain levels, more. Um, and it was also, I have to say, on a filmmaking level, you know, you look back at your earlier films, and there's like clunky things in it. In a weird way, to me, my second film has probably more of those kind of like moments. But but and certainly Girlstown has its share, but um, I just also really admired, like, there's a really centerpiece scene early on in the film, where the main characters, it's a very very long scene, and it's done in one single shot for most of it, and I don't know, I just watch it and I just think, wow, this is really, the performances are just absolutely fantastic
Yeah.
here. And it just feels, they're talking about things that we consider quote unquote issues, but they're also talking about life as friends. And so somehow, I don't know. Anyway, I'm tooting my own horn here a little bit, but I think it's really, you know, I think it very much held up, at least, for me, and a lot of people are saying that. So, I'm really interested to see how it plays out in the world,
No,
in the
I
coming
think you're
years.
absolutely right. And like I said, I was kind of blown away. I mean, the scene in the bathroom when she's writing
Mm,
patriarchy.
right, right,
I mean, I know that word has been around and the idea has been around for a long time, but it's really only fairly recently that it's become so mainstream that
right.
people have been talking about. I mean, this film was way ahead of its time in retrospect.
Mm,
It's
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I am proud of that fact, and but also really, really excited that it does feel super relevant now. So I feel, because I thought, I don't know, we put it back out, great, more people can see it. I really want it online because it was basically unavailable to see for about at least 15 years. Once all the VHSs fell apart, and it wasn't digitally available for streaming, basically. So to see a whole new generation be able to look at this film and make up their minds about how it plays for them is exciting venture for me. And I don't want to have too many high hopes, but I do think, given the time we're in the middle of right now, with this all this hyper masculinity that's rearing its head, and our soon to be president taking office, I think it has a relevancy that no one could have predicted.
Well, when you look back, I know this is probably something you've talked about a million times before, but I kind of forgot. I was looking at the credits, and it states that the script for this film came about through acting workshops of some sort. Can
Hmm.
you explain to our listeners a little bit about how the story evolved and how
Sure.
it came to be the film that it is?
Yeah, absolutely. I had done like a bunch of music videos, mostly very small ones for small bands, and I had made a short documentary about a group of men in a nursing home in the Boston area. Um, but I hadn't written a script, and I hadn't made a feature, and yet I got this idea for this film. And of course, as a young white male, um, I realized at the time very, very clearly, like, I can't write this. I can't. I've come up with this outline for this story that I think would be a really good film, but in order for it to have credibility and be realistic, I shouldn't be the sole creator of this thing. So, not to mention that I'd never wrote a screenplay. So, I moved to New York City. I started studying acting because I thought that was the first thing I really needed to do in order to, tackle a narrative film. And in the course of the acting process, I thought, I should put together an improvisation workshop. I met with a couple other filmmakers who had done similar things, and I'd read already about Mike Lee, who does a very, very different kind of development for his films, but it also involves improvisation. And the other British filmmaker, Ken Loach, who actually does more improvisation on set than in the writing.
Hmm.
But I just thought, well, what would my process be? And so we cast the actors in the film, the lead actors, and we brought in people to do some of the side roles as needed. And for a couple months, in a space in Lower Manhattan, we worked every day, just looking at like scenes that had very raw descriptions and some kind of like guidelines to them about actions that would happen, and doing improvisations. And we do a couple takes. We videotaped all of it because we knew we would want to transcribe it for the script writing. Um, and then we would sit down and talk at a table and talk about like, well, what happened with the scene? Where is it going? What, do we want to be going in this direction? How has this scene and playing it out changed character X, Y, or Z in terms of how we're creating them? Because we were kind of creating the characters at the same time that we were creating the story. And then we would get back on our feet and we would do it again and over again, et cetera, et cetera. And those workshops yielded about 700 pages of dialogue transcripts, I believe. And then I sat down with those and put them into a very raw script. And then through the script writing process, would send them out to Brooklyn and Lily and Anna, the three leads in the film, and also to Denise Casano, who was another actor who took part in the workshops, but whose character was actually cut before we made the film, which was unfortunate, but it was just too much for the film to handle another main character. Um, and we wrote the script from there. The producer Lauren Zelaznik had a lot of input as well, and so it was a real collaborative process. So that once we made the actual film, we did have some rehearsals, but for the most part, there was it. It's sometimes people feel like it's very improvised on screen, but it hopefully feels that way because it was improvised before the writing even
Hmm.
happened. And so we captured a lot of, what feels like more realistic rather than screenwriterly dialogue.
I have to say that it's pretty amazing, not only the subjects that you tackle in this film that were way ahead of its time, but just even you yourself to have that idea that maybe I need to bring in some other people. It's the
Mm.
right thing to do. Like I know that's done today, but
Hmm.
back then I don't think that was even done quite as much. It's amazing that you did that. Do you remember any of the significant contributions that some of the people that you mentioned brought to the process of coming up with the story? Any ideas or moments?
Hmm. Wow. Well, Lauren Zalaznik, the producer, was, kind of, she was on from the very, very beginning. And throughout the whole process, she was a really vital person to kind of check in with. And I don't remember any big specific things. She probably will when we start doing Q&As at screenings. But I'm trying to think. It was just interesting. It was always like really little things, like trying to figure out the moment when we realized in as we were working that Lily's character, Patty, originally she was a little bit of like a metalhead kind of, um, and as the improvs went on, the bond between her and Angela became a much more clear one. And she was like, I wouldn't be listening to that stuff. Come on, and Brooklyn agreed, and so we said, okay, great. So we changed that, and then of course when you see the film, that affects a lot. I mean, her look, her
Man.
clothing, her way of being, and just the milieu in general. So, I don't think there was one very, very big thing that happened in the improvs, which was that we originally I think we did a couple little sessions, um, and there had been a character. Originally, there was a character of Nikki, and there was an actor who was playing that character, whose trajectory in the film was very, very different. Right now in the film, Nikki leaves the film as a character partway through, and that her exit from the film is actually very influential on what comes after. Um, but this actor who we were working with in the workshop decided at the last minute to drop out of it, and we were really thrown for a loop because all the talking we had done and all the outlines we had made really included this fourth main character. And so, we just kind of shut down for about a week. And it was the actors, Lily and Anna and Brooklyn, got together on the phone, and they came back to me and they said, this is what we have to do with that character, um, to we can still have that character in the film, but this is how we should handle this, and that became a massively important plot point for the film itself.
One of the things that really struck me in rewatching the film is the casual reactions of some of the characters to when there was someone that they found out that had done them wrong in some way. The idea that it's okay to get some revenge, either by destroying a car or stealing one's things and selling
Hmm.
them. And again, this idea, there's been other films like Do the Right Thing,
Mm.
was an important film back then. But in the news in recent years, there have been people who have reacted to things in society that were, in their minds, unjust, and then sometimes it leads to certain acts being committed. I was wondering what your thoughts are now, looking back on the story in terms of. I know it's just a story, but the idea of the characters sometimes taking justice into their own hands. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just funny. Right while you were saying that, I'm thinking about Luigi, and I'm like, oh my goodness, yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. It's a very, 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 very different scenario, but nevertheless, it is a form of vigilanteism. I, you know, I know that the Lorena Bobbitt story had happened before we made this, and that was a big thing in the news. But it was kind of so. For people who don't know, it was a woman who was being abused, and she castrated her abuser, um, and it was just lurid enough and kind of shocking enough that I think it didn't inspire quite the intellectual conversation that it maybe could have. But um, I don't know. I was very interested in exploring that realm, um, about of like when someone and some segment of society has just kind of had enough, and how much you know is are there places where violence and retribution are justified. I think, oddly enough, at the very, very beginning of the idea, I think I was also reading a lot of materials about suicide bombers and terrorist acts, and just kind of trying to understand, the dynamic, and all of it is based in this power dynamic, and a history. So all those things kind of came together, and well, the original outline was, when I look back on it, was definitely a little bit cheesy. It definitely had a little bit of that B movie kind of thing in it, of like these things happen and they bond together and it's like a gang. They go out and seek revenge, and that was the beauty of the improv process, where we were able to make it human. We were able to, again, that big scene with a very long shot in it,
Yeah.
it goes from a point of people, some of the characters confronting people say, I was raped. Come on, you were that. Come on, don't talk about it like that. You just, you shouldn't have gotten in that car. It goes from that to this kind of realization point within a 6-minute scene, but hopefully like in a very subtle and nuanced way, and then things get more exciting from there. But yeah, so that's where a lot of that came from.
Yeah, it's so good. Another thing that I was thinking back to was, as I mentioned earlier, I think initially I was drawn to the film because I was getting wind of the soundtrack because I've been
Mm,
doing a soundtrack show for many years, and I understand from learning about your film that some of the soundtrack money was like part of the deal in the beginning in terms of making this film happen. But it was a very innovative soundtrack, and I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the role that the music played in the film, and also Guru. I love in
mhm.
the film some of the transitions from scene to scene where you hear the scratching, and
Mm.
it's a very interesting soundtrack. Not even like taking into consideration all the major artists that you had, which is incredible.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in the beginning, actually, when I made the film, I knew that there would be source music, which is what the actual soundtrack album is. It's all the radio stuff, whether it's playing in a car passing by or on a radio. But my expectation was that I probably wouldn't have a score, because I'm kind of a fan of that, and most of my films have not had scores in them. Um, but when it was done, we definitely felt like you mentioned "Do the Right Thing," and it's in my top 10 of all time, and I was definitely inspired by the way Spike Lee kind of the boldness with which he constructs narratives. That they can be very, very realistic at times. Then they sometimes can like pop out to like one of the actors addressing the camera, and
Mm.
then he'll have a montage sequence. And I definitely, I, I was inspired by some of that, like stylistically. Um, but once we figured out we needed actual score, we someone led me to Guru, and that was great. I think he had a lot of existing tracks that he then played with, and we kept it minimal, but put it in the places that it was needed, and I think it worked really well to keep the film like tied together. And then the soundtrack itself was actually done and decided on after the film was sold. When we showed the film at Sundance on 16 millimeter, it had a completely different soundtrack to it
Oh
because
wow.
we hadn't cleared any licensing. And in fact, the opening music to the film, the opening song was a TLC song. I'm spacing out on the name of it right now, which is crazy, but something wicked this way comes, and it's a great song, and it was just so good in the opening. And that was the one song we wanted to use that we couldn't afford in the end. That we couldn't get permission for. But when we sold the film, we did get a sideline soundtrack deal with Mercury Records, and it was that time where like people were thinking that soundtracks were going to really help drive films and vice versa, and it was a pretty sizable deal. In the end, I think we sold about 200 CDs, so I feel a little bit bad about that. But the money allowed us to get really great music: Queen Latifah, Salt-N-Pepa, Roxanne Shante, PJ Harvey, Luscious Jackson. It was really great, and just to try to bridge, everything from that hip hop world to Riot Girl type stuff. Um, and the Latifah song in particular, UNITY, I feel like is just like a perfect anthem for the film. So that was really, really nice.
As someone who's been involved with like releasing a soundtrack, just the inside scoop. Today, a lot of the older soundtracks are not available for streaming. Is it simply just because people can make playlists and it doesn't make financial sense to license the song? Like I was just wondering about
Mm,
the the math or the financial reasons
right.
why a lot of soundtracks are not available.
I think sometimes for the same reason that a lot of films are not available anymore or barely seeable. We made a 25-year licensing agreement when we sold the film to October Pictures and October Films, and over the years they got bought by the film traded hands to company to company to company to company and ended up with Universal Pictures in the end. But you end up at this place where the film has run its course, it's in a vault, and there's not much really new to do with it. And no one at one of those places said when streaming came along, "Hey, we should get this online." It just wasn't thought about by the new
Hmm.
people, the people at that new company. So the same thing, hundreds, probably thousands and thousands of CDs were made, and they probably were thrown in the garbage a couple of years ago when someone went into the vault and said, "Hey, this this thing never sold any copies." Um, so I don't even know, like, it'd be nice to make a play just a playlist or something like that. But yeah, I think that as time passes, people focus on the new stuff, and they feel like that's what they can make some money off of, and if not, it's just not worth the trouble. My guess is that people will make their own bootleg playlists of the songs in this film and put them up however they put them up. So that would be nice to be able to listen to the whole collection.
Well, I wish it was official. A big collector of soundtracks, and you go back and you look all the way back at something like The Graduate. Like a
Mm.
significant soundtrack for a film from that time, and you can still get it on CD and stuff like that. Not that anyone's buying CDs anymore, but I think this one is a major one. Like it really was kind of unique for its time, and the music is significant, especially when you put together all those artists that you have with the themes and the ideas in the film. I don't know. It was a great little package. From the beginning, I think you had support from feminist groups. Is that correct for this film?
We did. In the same way that I improvised, that I collaborated with the actors on the script. We collaborated on the release. We had a really great opening with the Third Wave Fund, which was a new organization at that time, and had screenings at girls' clubs and all sorts of places. And Ms. Magazine did a nice feature on the film, and so yeah, there were a lot of people involved in that at the time of the release who are still working and doing great stuff in the feminist activist movement. And it was always the first question was always like, yeah, but you're a guy, like, what's the story here? But I think the film speaks for itself, and people embraced it for what it was and what it said, and that was fantastic. And my hope, now with TikTok and social media, that it will find a whole new bunch of viewers and a whole new arena in which to be seen, and then hopefully some of those feminist groups will come back into the fold and help get the word out.
Well, I agree, and I hope that maybe we can speak again in the future, Jim. But can you just give our listeners? It's unfair because you've had an amazing career. Can you just give everybody sort of a quick recap of? I know you've been working. You've had other films. You've done a lot of television work. Some of the highlights, just really quickly before we say goodbye.
Okay. I made two films for HBO at the middle of my career, Everyday People and Angel Rodriguez, and I'm very proud of both of those. And my last film was called En el Séptimo Dia, and it's available online. And it was a film that was made with primarily non-actors, and that was also very, very cool. On television, man, the list is very long because I've done almost 100 shows I've directed, but some really, really great ones. And I would say In Treatment, The Wire, Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, Mr. Robot.
Oh my God,
Um,
that's incredible.
uh, yeah, all those shows, The Good Fight, The Good Wife. But just I've been very, very lucky, and so yeah, um, the stuff is that the TV stuff stays out there, so that's a good thing about that.
Can I ask you just really quick? I don't know if you saw this, but Quentin Tarantino was recently on Joe Rogan's podcast, and very interesting interview. And he made this comment. I was curious what your take was on it, and this is not verbatim, but he was talking
Mm,
about the difference between television and film,
mhm,
and he knows right now that everyone is making the comment that television is sort of replacing film or that's even better than film. And obviously he has his own opinion because he has mostly been doing films, but
Right.
his take was something along the lines of that, like he's watched a lot of these shows and that they are amazing, but that when he's in the moment and watching them, he's blown away. But then when they're done, he forgets them. You don't remember a specific moment the way you remember your favorite films.
Mm.
And I mean, there was a little bit more to it than that, but
Right.
he was
Right.
saying that they're really just sort of like glorified soap operas, like ongoing dramas. And I mean, I've heard all the arguments why that's not true because there's amazing filmmaking going on, and some of the shows that you've been involved in are top notch. But do you have a personal response to that idea in general about the
I
difference
do.
between film and
I do.
television?
And I didn't think I'd ever really agree with him on anything. I'm not a giant fan, but and I'm sure
No,
it would
that's
be vice
fine.
versa.
Yeah.
But I would go actually further. I mean, I do. I think that actual the kind of the the HBO AMC time was the apex. It was, and stuff before that too. There was great shows like MASH. I feel like are better than a lot of shows
Mhm.
that are being produced today. And even though it was network television, but I don't know. I think in the recent years, the algorithms have taken over a little bit. Things have changed, and it's very very difficult to get a Sopranos or a Wire made. And even once they're made, I just feel like they're not as they don't where the exciting stuff is happening in television for me is coming from younger generations, mostly on half-hour shows where people are just kind of you can tell they're not going by a rule book. They're not being told by producers or network what they have to do. And you look at shows like Atlanta,
Mm.
Reservation Dogs, I May Destroy You, um, even a show like Broad City. Those I think are the shows because they're smaller budgets and they're a little bit more like um, they're less star oriented. Those are the shows to me that are really like that's the new exciting thing in television. It's not that new, but I think that some of these bigger, marquee dramas, it sometimes it just I don't know. It's a little junk foody in a way, you
Mhm.
know. So I mean, again, like I say, I've been super lucky, and I like working on everything. I like if it's a simple cop show, that's fun for me, and I like the process. But as a viewer, for me, nothing beats sitting in a movie theater and not being able to leave your seat for 2 hours or three, which is fine with me. Um, and just being completely wrapped up in a film, not checking your phone, not going to get a snack, and watching a story that's from start to finish, and no one feels like, what are we going to do for the next season? What are we going to do for the next episode? So TV shows are hard to make. They're really, really
Yeah.
hard to make. So I do agree with that statement. I think the really epic ones are few and far between.
Is it hard? Can you think of a way moving forward that when people think of your career, I mean, maybe you don't care, but I'm sure some people do. Um, like directors are often known for their films that are single films that are in theaters or
Mhm.
maybe streaming, but but when you direct shows like episodes of shows, it's more difficult for the public to be aware of this body of specific work that you did. And I'm sure you've done
Mm.
like amazing things in all those different episodes that you've done. Is there any better way you think for directors to be able to somehow let the public in on, I don't know, becoming more aware of the body of work, even when it appears in these different series, or is that not important?
Well, you're right. I mean, there's just so many episodes and so much material, and that directing credit comes up, and before it's over, it's the thing. The screen is shrunken, you're being told to watch another show.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's really difficult for directors. But the odd thing is, truthfully, like um, the director on a certain level on a TV show, you're not really supposed to know. You're not. I mean, yeah. Again, there's certain shows and there's certain directors um, where that's not the case. But oddly enough, I remember watching Quentin Tarantino's CSI episode long, long time ago, and it felt like a Quentin Tarantino
Mm,
episode. And I remember I was just starting off directing at that point television, and I remember thinking like the whole point is you're not when you when you go to direct a show, the whole idea is it should not it should feel like the last show. Like
yeah.
a fluency, you know? And so part of your job is to actually do great work, bring what you do to it, make it special in the way you work, but not make it stand out from the rest of the things because that's not what the shows are, you know? So
Wow.
that's the conundrum I think for directors. You're in a weird way, it's with the very big shows and the really special shows, yeah, certain directors get the credit and the notice. But for the most part, we're kind of supposed to be a little bit anonymous. It's a very, very, very big team effort, as is every film as well.
Yeah. Wow, so interesting. I know we have to wrap this up. If people want to learn more about Girlstown and where it's going to be shown, I think it's going to be playing in the city.
Hmm.
You want to direct people anywhere on social media or
Sure,
online?
sure. The distributor is Film Movement, and they have a page on Instagram and probably other stuff that I don't know about. There's a Instagram account called Girlstown Movie that will be putting up, notice of everything that happens. Right now, we open in New York City on January 17th. We'll play for a week. If a lot of people go, it'll play for longer. And then we'll probably be in Los Angeles in February or March. And then for the rest of the year, for the rest of 2025, we'll be playing in cinemas, mostly art cinemas around the country, before the film comes out on DVD and Blu-ray a year from now.
Well, I want to highly recommend to everybody check out Girlstown if you haven't seen it already. Jim, it's really been a pleasure. What a career you've had, and I wish you the best with Girlstown this year.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very, very much.
All right, take it easy. Bye bye.
Bye. Hey, Tom, before you go.
Yes.
Oh, good. You can cut this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously. Um, I'll send you a soundtrack.
Oh my God, that would be fantastic.
I have some somewhere. I think in a box somewhere. I'm sure I've got like at least a dozen. Yeah.
Oh man, you don't have to, but that would be
No, 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 no. Can you just email me through my with a like it'll be easiest unless
with the
you want I
publicist
can
or
write your
with
down
my.
your address right now if you want.
I can give it to you right now, or if you want, I can
Okay.
just.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, it's sounds of film at
Hmm.
yahoo.com.
Oh, okay. But how do I actually mail it to you?
Oh, I'm sorry, the address. 30
Hmm.
Whitney Gate,
Well, say
30,
that again.
30,
Hmm.
30, Whitney, as in Whitney Houston,
Hmm.
and then Gate, Gate,
Hmm.
in Smithtown, New York,
Hmm.
11787.
Great.
Uh,
Where's Smithtown?
it's do you know Stony Brook University or this
Oh yeah,
or
yeah.
not too far from the Cinema Arts Center in Huntington, like kind of in
Oh,
between those two.
oh, great. Hopefully we'll play there, and hopefully we'll play at all the upstate films places, which are super exciting what they're doing for the state of New York and cinema.
Yeah,
Um, I'm gonna just check this one more time. So 30 Whitney Gate, Smithtown, New York, 11787.
that is it. That would be incredible. Thank you so much. But
Sure thing.
um,
My
congratulations.
pleasure.
I'm really glad
Okay.
this film is being re-released. All
Fantastic.
right,
Thanks.
take it
I really,
easy.
really appreciate this.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.